Welcome. You are listening to the House of Yoga's podcast, The Pathway to Progress. We are here to inspire yoga teachers, teachers in training, and yoga lovers who are curious about the journey of becoming a yoga teacher, developing their teaching career and business, and for anyone who wants to enhance their yoga practice and get better at life. Hello, this is Jason Pooley, and today I'm joined by Alex Johnson, an amazing osteopath who was born actually to principal dancers of the Royal Ballet. He's a father of two, and he knows a thing or two when it comes to holistic health and living with vibrant energy. So good to have you here, Alex. I really appreciate you being a yes for this discussion and sharing your time with us.
Hey, Jason, really nice to be here with you, buddy.
Thank you. Now, Alex, you grew up with osteopathy playing a really important role in yours and also your family's life. I know personally how important health, happiness, and lifestyle is for you, Alex, and how you can help others also to discover their own natural path to vibrant health. Can you share with us right at the beginning here a snapshot of your journey, Alex, from when you first attained your very first class honors, right, degree from the British School of Osteopathy? Am I right in saying that was back in 2003?
Yep, you're right. I sort of joined the osteopathic college in '99, cracking just before the 2000 change. I was, yes, as you were right, my parents dragged me along to osteopaths when I was a real little kid, back in the 80s, when they would be on stage that night and be injured, and they'd go to see the medical profession, and they just couldn't take several weeks off or go on lots of medications and stay away from the stage. So they went to these weird and wonderful osteopathic rooms, and I was taken along where someone would help and treat them and get them back on stage. But in those early days, there were several interventions that happened in my family with myself, my sister, and them, where osteopaths took a more prominent role in their medical history, sort of stopped my sister from having a couple of operations unnecessarily. And so that just gave me a glimpse into the fact that osteopaths, these weird and wonderful people that were tucked away, were a little bit more than just a manual therapist. So I decided that's the way I was going to go, and I joined the British School of Osteopathy after a gap year after college, or after school days, and that was the most medical osteopathic college out there, and still is. It's now called UCO, the University College Osteopathy, but back then it was the British School of Osteopathy. And it was just a very interesting period of time. As you said, that was about around 2000, where a couple of other osteopathic colleges in the country got closed down because the osteopathic profession was trying to fall into regulation with the medical profession. And seemingly in doing so, we lost a lot of our old philosophy. So I was very lucky enough to have several colleges worth of students come and join our osteopathic college and bring with them a lot of old osteopathic knowledge. And when I mean that, I mean the type of osteopathy that was done back in the early 1900s. So I learned effectively the most medicalized, scientific standing into the medical profession osteopathy at the BSO, but I also then traveled at the same time to learn from the oldest osteopaths out there how to treat people with much more constitutional diseases. So I did that just after I graduated in 2003. And then soon later, when my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and I had to hold his hand through a year and a half of medical treatment, which unfortunately was his demise, then I expanded the scope of my learning and really went back to what was the original sort of naturopathic beginnings, which was the beginnings of something called nature cure and natural hygiene, which is much more in the sort of early 1700s and 1800s, that really gave rise to all forms of alternative therapies that are out there today. And so I then spent the last sort of 15 years studying that in depth with again a couple of very, very old teachers, and that has just given me the knowledge to look after people either from afar or to give them the lifestyle advice to go hand in hand with that, with osteopathy.
That's great, and thanks for sharing that. You speak with so much passion, and I've definitely, I've been a client of yours, and it's amazing. You have magical hands, and I was saying to my wife last night, I really miss, because obviously we've had the pandemic. I really miss those sessions with Alex. So I'll definitely be back on the table soon, my friend.
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to, what I always like to say to people is those times, and you're lucky when you're an osteopath and you got good hands. So I'm happy about that. But it's this philosophy that we also look after our patients, or sort of outside of the treatment room. So I always say to people that, if I can have half an hour treatment session with you, then that represents 1/48th of the day. And that also then equates to being 1/336th of the week. And so whilst that time on the plinth, with me doing what I consider to be the best version of classical osteopathy, which is effectively the free flow of blood, nerve and lymph around the body, and being a mechanic and an electrician and a plumber to the body, and being very good with our hands at finding strains and lesions and helping the body, it's actually the lifestyle advice that is the most important to cover all of the rest of the time when you're not with us. And what it does is it also puts the locus of control of one's health back in the patient or the person, so that there's much less reliance on, oh, I'm injured, or my health I need to go and see Alex for that treatment. So I always think of the osteopathy, or the classical osteopathic part, as being the hands-on approach, mechanical part, but everything that you do outside of that treatment is covered from the sort of nature cure philosophy, and that's all of the lifestyle things that cover this omnilateral approach to healthful living, that both takes you towards your full potential of health, but also gives you the chance to sort of recover from acute or chronic illnesses. So it's just taking that side to the lifestyle consultancy being everything outside of that clinic room.
And it's great. And one thing that really stood out for me, Alex, when I was seeing you on a regular basis, was how you always brought me back to the importance of simplicity. I really remember that. And what I mean by that is, that remembering of resetting, coming back to the basics. I always remember you sort of sharing that with me, and it wasn't sort of rocket science, but it was a really good reminder, and it definitely worked. So coming back to the basics, and doing what my body actually really needed, which was slowing down and resting. I'm sure you remember this, right?
Yeah.
Resting, clean eating, getting out in nature, movement. Obviously, we'll speak more to that movement in this discussion, and so much of our healing comes from feeling, right? So and that's by slowing down, and that's one thing that really stood out for me when I was having those sessions with you.
Yeah, I'd like there's a lot of words like in nature cure, like innovation, vitality, and one of the big things is, we all have a battery life inside of us. Now, whether you want to call that your breath of life, or your soul, or your spirit, there is that electricity, there is that thing that is within inside of our mechanical body that that makes us alive. It makes us thrive. And so how we use that battery life, how we use that energy, is really important. So our body uses a lot of energy in digestion, for example. Over 50% of your daily energy goes to breaking down the food that you imbibe, and we think of it as, oh, I need some food for energy, but it actually takes a lot of energy to break that food down into its constituent parts before your body rebuilds it. And so, to a certain extent, depending on how old you are and where you're at in your health journey, conservation of energy and conserving energy that you don't want to waste can be very, very important for regaining your health. We need energy, as we said, to digest, but you also need a lot of energy to eliminate toxic byproducts of metabolism from your body. So we call this toxemia, or toxicity within the bloodstream. And normally, as I said, when we mention about toxicity, people thinking sort of cigarettes and coffee and carbonated drinks, but we just don't think about the byproducts of cellular metabolism. And so the body has to, as if you're a monk living a pure yogic lifestyle, eating all the right foods and meditating and moving and everything else, they still have the same organs of elimination, which are your skin, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, and your uterus if you're a female. And so all of these organs are there to eliminate toxins from the body, but we need energy in order to do that. So when you have someone who's chronically ill, for example, conserving that energy or working on their rest and their sleep is paramount to building up their vitality, in order that they may go into something which we'll hopefully talk about in a bit, which is an acute crisis, which is where you're going through an acute eliminative effort by the body to expel detritus from the body. And so again, depending on where that person is on their lifestyle, whether they've got any acute illnesses or issues with their health underneath it, that it's sometimes backing off the exercise or backing off the extra digestion or the movement practices, and focusing on some of these simple what I like to call the physiological requirements of life. And so again, if we were to list those like 9 things in nature cure which we look at within a person, that would be sun, air, water, diet, rest and sleep, movement, spinal integrity, mental thought or positive mental attitude, and then the last one, which is the avoidance of toxic chemical environmental compounds. And so within each one of those ones, it kind of covers all of the life skills, and looks at our body more as a physiological mechanism and what it requires, as if you've gone and bought a plant or you've gone and got an animal, and you literally need to start to learn how to feed it, how to drink, how to move, how to rest and sleep. Because whilst the consciousness that the human being has is quite a wonderful thing, and we are one of the only biological organisms that will quite happily go against its physiological requirements of life and do things which are positively harmful for us, under the guise of enjoyment, if that makes sense.
Yes, powerful, and it's mind-blowing. And this is such a great thing in regards to our listeners, right? So many of them yogis or yoga teachers, maybe, you know, yoga students that are wanting to perhaps become a yoga teacher. And what yoga does, is we know, is actually it really does wake us up and has us being more conscious and you know, yeah, more present to all of the stuff that you're actually speaking to. And when you're sharing this, I'm thinking about that energy, and everything's energy, right? And so we can generate so much energy through the practice of yoga, but also at the same time, it's a great practice to restore energy as well. And so I love that thank you for bringing up the conversation of energy, because it's so important. And I was leading a training this weekend, and we were practicing pranayama, and obviously that's a big part of breath work, obviously, and how to generate, and also how to retain energy. And yeah, it's very important, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. Just diverting a little bit, just quickly, because I noticed that you've recently ran up Mount Snowdon barefoot, right, with your family, which looks pretty magical. How was that for you? And can you share, Alex, why barefoot, and what are the benefits of doing this?
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose firstly, I've sort of been treating for 20 years, and so I've never worn shoes in the treatment room, that's for sure. So I'm always barefoot. That gives me a nice connection to the floor. It makes me feel the temperature of the floor. It gives me an idea of what the patients are feeling like standing maybe in less clothes or in their underwear. I've got a good temperature idea of the environment, and obviously it's grounding, and there's all those feelings that come with that. But over the last several years, I've spent much more time walking and running outside barefoot. And just in really enjoying that connection to my environment and the ground. And the only way I can describe it now is that when I walk around or I'm running around, I can sort of tell what the ground is going to feel like underneath my feet, in the way that you could tell what a fabric might feel like, it's going to feel like when you pick it up in your hands. To me, it would be like doing a handstand now with some oven mitts on. You just can't feel the ground with your hands so well, and it's exactly the same with the feet. Now there are 26 bones in the feet, and there are what would be considered to be 33 joints, specific joints, but all of those joints of the feet, all of those bones of the feet, articulate with each other on multiple surfaces. So actually, when you work out all of the different planes of movement, there are thousands of planes of movement just within the ankle and the foot itself. And this whole bony framework is held together with ligaments and tendons and muscles as sort of tensegrity structure, but it really is the basis, the pillar of how our grounding and how our posture and how our balance of the rest of our spine articulates with the floor. So in the same way that as a child, we are born with a long C curve in our back. Our whole spine is in a one long C curve, and then the movements of the head and the neck whilst we're breastfeeding and early reflexes develops the extended curve of the neck. And then as we turn onto our tummy and we extend our back, we go up onto all fours, and then we start crawling around. That develops the lumbar spine, the lumbar curve, so that then when we start squatting, pulling ourselves to an upright position, and we go to stand up as a very small toddler, we've already developed these three lovely, beautiful curves of our spine, which you could see in any kind of skeletal or medical textbook. But that framework is still built under sort of the guise of gravitational force. It's how our body develops. And so as that center of gravity line, as we look at an adult skeleton, traverses through the body, and then it traverses through the pelvis, the central gravity line will go directly through the acetabulum at the top of the femur, at the top of the leg, and then it will go precisely through the middle of the knee joint, and then through the ankle joint to the floor. So we find that those arches of the feet and the bones have developed there in order to sustain this center of gravity line right the way above us. So it really is the basis of the Eiffel Tower or any tall building. If the basis is structurally sound, then the top will stand. So even before, as an osteopath, looking at the spine and upwards, we've got to look at the baseline.
Well,
So
that's amazing, right? So, as I said, we're just leading a training this weekend, and the key sort of anatomical, when we look at the alignment of the yoga practice, we call it Tadasana or true north alignment, and obviously it starts there at the feet, right? The base, the foundation, and you build it from the ground up. And I guess that's what you're sharing. The way you articulate this is amazing, and I could listen to you speak about this all day long.
I mean, I've worn. I mean, just finishing that point, I suppose I've been worn barefoot shoes now for sort of 5 years. I'm barefoot most of the time. I've now worn them so much in every pair of shoes that I can't wear any of my really old trainers or shoes that have come around. Maybe a pair goes on at a wedding or a funeral these days. But it's that spreading of the front of the feet. So actually, most shoes are restricting at the front around the toes, and they are wider at the back. Whereas most barefoot or all barefoot shoes are more held at the back around the ankle, and they're much wider at the front. So you have this total change of the opening of your feet and the mechanics of your toe. And again, we wouldn't think of a dancer or a gymnast or if we think someone in the Olympics doing the beam or any forms of the gym, would we expect to see them in trainers? Or if we went to see a ballet, or would we see the dancing on stage, would they be in shoes because of the worry about their feet articulating with the floor? No. And it's exactly the same as far as we go to some of the best runners or areas in the world where we have runners. They tend to be barefoot. So this idea of barefoot, being barefoot will collapse your arches and being bad for your feet is fully to the contrary, put it like that. But I have done that. I do sort of try to do 3 miles plus barefoot most days. And then when I get to times, quite often if I do a longer run, I need a few days in between because my feet are just a little bit sensitive. But over the years, that's just created a nice little padding, very soft actually on the base of the feet. But then it does mean that this articular ability then develops, so that, for example, when I went on Snowdon with my two girls who are 9 and 6, they were really tired from a long term, so they were exhausted anyway. They were quite happy to walk along the long shingle path along to the base of Snowdon, but then they were pretty exhausted. So I ended up actually carrying one of them on my back for most of the climbs. And again, just it's this whole sort of idea of fighting gravity, how you feel, how flexible you are in multi-directional movements of your body, how loose your long levers are, which are your upper extremities and your lower extremities. And I actually found that the worst bit of the walk really was the man-made shingle path for the first like 0.7 of a mile, or first mile or so, because actually you'd much prefer to go off the path and be off in the grass or in the mud or anywhere else where it's a much more of a natural environment. But yeah, it was really fun doing the climb with the girls, and it's even fun, nicer for the girls having that experience of walking past all the other walkers who are then seeing this little sort of mountain Sherpa running up barefoot with their kids on their back to the top, where we're up in the sort of rain or clouds up at the top. And yeah, really exhilarating. And at the top, you know, feet are just warm, they're feeling fine within the environment. And yeah, it's a really pleasant experience.
Definitely looked illuminated, that's for sure. The video I was watching yesterday. It's awesome. I love it. So just coming back a little bit on your journey of, you know,
Yeah.
you're very curious and wanting to get out there and explore, you know, ways towards or more vibrant health, holistic health. What could you share with us? What are the most important insights, would you say, and benefits you've experienced on your own journey to holistic health? Like if there were sort of big sort of out, you know, insights that have really stood out, what are they?
Okay. I think the biggest one, going straight for it, is not what you do when you're well, but what you do when you're ill. And starting to change people's idea of what it means to not feel great or not feel well. Because we're full of these terms like disease or illness or feeling poorly, and we think of that as the time to go to the doctor, because no one really likes to suffer, and we don't like to see other people suffer. But the whole power of nature cure, natural hygiene, old osteopathic texts are all about understanding the benefit of the acute crisis. And the acute crisis, as I said, is a fundamental part of of the alternative philosophy, which is that our bodies have this vibrant energy, which is always on a cellular level trying to do the right thing. Our bodies are always trying to eliminate waste from our body, and we are always trying to do the best that we can with what we've got. Now, most of the time, if you live a healthful or healthy lifestyle, and if you deal with all these different physiological requirements of life, then you can potter along without many acute crises, with living what you would consider to be vibrant health. But as sometimes this starts to go wrong, either because we fail on some of these physiological requirements of life, or we overburn our bodies in some way, whether it be too much exercise or too little sleep, or not enough movement, or the wrong kind of foods, all these different avenues. And there are certain times when the body then absorbs it, and it does it without shouting. But there are other times where it needs to have an acute period of rest in order to have an acute period of healing. So for your listeners, maybe if we think about people who are yogis, who maybe try and eat the right food, who do a lot of exercise, if I stick a lot of them in a box, they might be younger, they might be quite flexible. And so there might be periods of time where maybe they take on extra healthful practices and they feel better for a short period of time, and then they might find that they start to go into an acute eliminative effort. And if they don't understand the relevance of why the body's doing that, why you may have lost your appetite, why you may be burning a fever, why you have suddenly become totally lethargic, why you might be feeling a bit depressed or a bit down in your body as your body deals with these toxins, then we can be very healthful and we can live this kind of great lifestyle whilst we're healthy or feeling good. But then when we're feeling bad, we get panicked and we start to run to the doctor. And unfortunately, the medical profession is based on suppression of symptoms. So for myself, and my wife, since we were at university, we haven't used any form of suppressive medication or any medical intervention for kind of now nearly 19 or 20 years. And that's having two children born at home, and also having dealt with our own and lots of friends and family and patients' acute crises. But for ourselves, unless you're in a sort of emergency accident or A&E type care, then I like to step away from all forms of medication in the suppression of the chronic. So when I help take people from a point of chronic disease towards a point of health, they have to start to understand that there's going to be periods of time at some point when the body wants to do these acute eliminative efforts, and what they effectively are sort of very rapid cleaning versions of cleaning out a house, let's say a derelict house. And so toxemia or byproducts of metabolism that have been stored within the body have to come out of you. So if you're losing a lot of weight, if you're coming off lots of medications, if you've changed your lifestyle, then your body might go through a period of detoxing, which feels good, but then it decides that it wants to do it in a really fast and effective way. And so one of the most important things is that when those acute crises come, that we don't panic and run straight for the anti-inflammatory or the fever suppressant. We don't try and feed when the body doesn't want to. So that's where the keeping it simple, the conservation of energy, the listening to all these requirements. And as I said, that it's taking the person through their periods of illness where they're actually getting well. So that's their time where they're going to jump from one position to another.
Transition, right? Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's trying to, as we would always like to say within the holistic world, it's trying to deal with the causes and not the suppression of the symptom. Because as we suppress the symptom or we suppress these acute phases, we're moving more and more into the state of chronic disease.
Wow, it's so insightful. And I see a lot right now. We're just talking about coaching and life coaching before we jumped on here, and I see many people that are experiencing, stress shows up and manifests in so many different ways, but overwhelm, Alex, and burnout is a really big thing that I see recently. It's been around obviously forever, but it just seems to be very prominent right now, and especially in the that experience of overwhelm or burnout and how that really impacts body and mind.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? We all aspire to get the greatest physical health or to feel energized, and there's something inside of us that feels almost bad if you're, let's say, even maybe a yogi or a health practitioner, and you think, oh, I'm not feeling so well. If we don't understand that process, if we don't understand that that's the time when our body's doing the right thing, we kind of feel embarrassed that we're low and we're lethargic, and everything around us, still from advertising, things that we'll hear within a radio or a TV or from the newspapers, is all about getting going, is all about feeling better, is all about running more and exercising more and being stronger and better. And a lot of that time, as you'll know, having a lot of athletes around you, as I was when I grew up with a lot of professional athletes as dancers around us, is that's often just far too much. It's too much for the body. A lot of the time when I have had experience of treating a lot of yoga teachers and gymnasts and dancers, that it's actually about trying to stop them doing so much training, try to encourage the periods of rest and recuperation in order that their body can start expressing it so well. Because if it was simply that the more we trained, the fitter and stronger we would get, then you'd just keep training and training and training, and you'd never take time off. But of course, all training and all movement, all exercise is a period of sort of micro damage and micro strain to the tissues that then go through a period of healing in order to get stronger. But you do need to recuperate the lost energy that you've had. Otherwise, we're starting on a sort of sleep or energy debt, as one would call it.
And that's exactly what I was saying right at the beginning of this discussion. I clearly, vividly remember, what really stood out for me when you were treating me back. It's crazy how time has gone, but 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was regular. It was every week, and I just felt great. And it was, and it was coming back to the basics, as I said earlier. Just not rocket science, but it was just a great reminder for me, and that's always stuck with me, and it always will for sure. So, quick one on this one. Sorry, were you?
No. I think that what osteopaths are like, try and think of as far as that sort of movement is concerned, and still with yoga, is what we're trying to employ is we're trying to help the free flow of blood, nerve, and lymph. So every cell in your body, whether it's the tip of your toe, your hair, your eyeball, your skin, anywhere, all of those cells require fresh, oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood. But they also need a venous and lymphatic drainage in order to take the waste products away. And as well as that, they need the provision of electricity via a nerve. So osteopaths, chiropractors, manual therapists, whoever they are there really to employ the opening of the tissues to encourage the flow of free oxygenated nutrient-rich blood to a tissue. But it's also to remove the strains and the compressions in order to take away that waste products. And in the same way, the electrician, you're hoping for a free flow of electricity. So, you know, mechanical treatment is, as I said, a little bit like plumbing or mechanics for your car or your building. All the rest of it is about what you put in, what you put on, and what you put around your car and how you drive it. And so I like to give those treatments where giving a lot of information around the outside as to what you should be doing to help in the lifestyle. But then I like to go totally quiet and let the patient like really relax. I like to reduce that adrenal tone to get the person to fall asleep. I'd say probably 70 to 80% of my patients are normally asleep during that treatment.
Almost 100%, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was always, oh yeah. And that's always the speed of which I can kind of make someone fall asleep and kind of reduce that adrenal tone and kind of really connect to their body by listening to it and by holding it and producing this free flowing state allows me to just see how much energy they have underneath it. So it's not a bad thing to fall asleep, but it's amazing how quickly you can make someone fall asleep if you just put them in that sort of comforting position. So there's one side which is that, you know, ideal recharging, taking your car for a really fast service, really fast MOT, having someone come around and kind of unbuckle hose pipes in your body, which is, I use that analogy like a slightly bent hose pipe, and you can see the vast reduction of flow, and that's what we want to have from the movement and the yoga and the exercise perspective, is to really to be doing that for yourself all the time, so you don't need to go and see someone to help structurally align you. You know, this is, I don't get too much treatment, and I'd like to give people enough movement advice so that they don't need to see osteopaths, but that power underneath our hands to affect the physiology is right there. But it's everything that they do, how they're running their body on the outside. When we start to understand that, we sometimes realize, yeah, really massively overtraining or not resting or not sleeping or not getting enough sun or not drinking any water or having the wrong nutrition or not getting yourself in a sort of positive state of mind. These are all really important physiological requirements that we can be doing great with one part, but we can be failing on all of the other parts. And it's normally those other parts that, when we go back to that thing you were asking before, like keeping it simple, some people kind of like the really complicated stuff, and sometimes it's actually getting outside, being in contact with the earth, getting yourself moving, you know, breathing fresh air, getting enough pure unfiltered water in your life, getting the right nutrition, resting and sleeping. All of those things can be much more important sometimes than focusing just on the exercise or just on the meditation.
Yeah, that's right. It's just changing that bit, you know, changing the behavior, I guess, changing the habit, and the awareness starts to shift, and actually start to see there's a different way, right? There's a new possibility, perhaps.
Yeah, it really is an alternative to medicine rather than alternative medicine. You know, that's a really important part. All of this stuff is not about suppressing the acute. So whilst a lot of modern day naturopaths have still gone towards ointments, tinctures, salves, homeopathic remedies, things that we still externalize, like that locus of control, I still like to think of it as just explaining to people so that they have a total understanding of what their body's trying to do. And then once you understand how it's got to that phase, you have a much clearer idea of how to reverse it.
Amazing. So good, so good. So just a quick one here. I really want to ask this question. Do you ever, I know you set up an amazing environment for you and your family where vibrant health and living can definitely be experienced, but do you ever get stressed out or ill, and if so, what is your process with dealing with that?
Yes, I do get stressed. that's I think that's all. That's a natural thing to happen,
right? You're a human being.
But yeah, I think ways of managing that stress, as you would understand, through meditation, through trying to calm your mind, also going through some of these breathwork practices, or some of these practices like getting in cold water and finding these serene states where we teach our body how to try and stay calm under those stress is important, and has been a lot of my more recent self discovery and personal work, I suppose. Over periods of time, over the last sort of 10 years, generally there have been times in the past where my back's gone myself once or twice a year. That generally has been when I've been under a lot of stress, with running backwards and forwards to London with work, having the kids when they were much younger and maybe not sleeping quite so well, or being slightly under sleep debt ourselves, and having moved from London to Stroud and stresses that come with that. But what I found is that it was this loss of multi-directional movement that came from the walking, the running, the climbing, the twisting, the swimming, all of these things, where I was still doing a lot of movement practices, but it was still based more on sort of flexion extension, what I call sort of two-dimensional, sort of forwards and backwards, rather than twisting and rotatory movements. So mechanically wise, I used to get some acute crises that would happen normally after a period of stress, after a lot of lifting, after a lot of treating, and a lot of driving, all condensed in the same place. But I found actually that things like the barefoot walking, barefoot running, outside gardening, those kind of multidisciplinary, multi-directional approaches that I encourage with people, has meant that all of those acute physical crises have dropped away. As far as illness on a constitutional basis is concerned, things like fevers, loss of appetites, illnesses, inflammations in the body that are more unconstitutional, that doesn't really happen very much with myself. Doesn't happen so much with us as a family. But when it does happen, we listen to it and we do exactly what our body's asking for, which is effectively crawl into bed, to fast physiologically until our body regains its appetite, and to not suppress the fever. Those are the three most important things that you can do, regardless who you are or where you are or what you're suffering from. Conserve the energy, stop burning energy on digestion, which your body doesn't want, and allow that redirection of energy in the fever, which is an increased metabolic rate, so that your body can eliminate through the channels of elimination, which is again your skin, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your uterus if you're a female. So what we are able to do is we just do that for each other. There are times where me or Jasmine or the children all need a period of physiological rest. It comes from outside, it comes from within our own bodies rather than being forced from the outside. And then when that happens, we listen to the organism, but without the fear. So as I said, this is something that I take with patients. Once we understand the benefits of a fever, once we understand the benefits of feeling extremely lethargic and going off our food, then we do it for ourselves. Then once we've done it for ourselves, we can start doing it for our friends, our family, our children. And that is one of the hardest things for people to understand, is that the suffering that they are seeing in their friend or spouse or child is of benefit. And so then when we understand the tools of how to support that acute crisis, rather than, if I just gave them some Calpol, if I just took the fever down, if I just managed to give them some food, they'd have more energy. All of these things are completely counterproductive to what the human or what the biological organism wants. And all old nature cure teachings all came from watching animals within nature. So if a deer has broken it, owl's broken its wing, or if an animal has injured its leg, what do? They tend to crawl into places, they stay warm, they close down, they go into almost permanent hibernation. They don't go looking for food, they don't go looking for movement. They disappear within to themselves, into the own organism. They do the healing and then they come back out again. And that's something that we've done for ourselves, but it's something that we've been able to teach our kids and take them through, so that they really, really understand that there's no call for anything external to themselves in order to get back to equilibrium, so to speak.
Yeah, equanimity. Right. I'm hearing an amazing, the way you share this is just an amazing awareness, Alex, and a deep listening, like the words that you were saying there, and also fear, that what you just shared, of actually not being fearful of it, right, and actually going in and listening and feeling. Like, feeling is healing, right? I remember you saying that to me many years ago. As
Yeah.
the way out is through. And
Yeah, I mean it is absolutely. I mean it's the most important thing. This understanding of acute. If you go back to any old natural hygiene, nature cure, osteopathic texts, it's all about the understanding of the acute, all of it. Because if we can understand the acute, we get rid of all of the chronic. And so all chronic diseases, whether it's autoimmune or whether they are chronic on all the constitutional approaches, the way out of them on a natural pace is through the acute. We get periods of feeling better and better and better with the changes that we have, but then our body goes into an acute eliminative effort. And I mean, if I can leave you with something or tell you something about the difference of those acute crises, because I think that this is, again, one of the most important things. Being ill is always helpful, but it doesn't mean that there aren't times where there's a slightly different take. So I call them the three different types of acute crisis. One is a toxic crisis. You've gone out, you've drunk the wrong drinks, you've eaten the wrong foods, you've stayed up too late, you haven't had any sleep, you've not done enough exercise, or you've done too much. All of these things that cause an increased amount of toxicity in the blood. And depending on our vitality, we can go into an acute crisis. This is when you're feeling too tired around Christmas and you just think, I don't want to eat any more food, I don't want to go out, I don't want to have any more drinks, and I think my throat's feeling a little bit weird, I feel a bit under the weather, I feel a bit hot. If I'm going to do something now, I think I'm going to be ill. But you do it anyway, and then the following day you wake up with a fever and you're not feeling very well and very nauseous. Well, then obviously it's still the body still trying to eliminate from the body, but it's not exactly what we would call a pure healing crisis, jumping you to a whole new level of health. It's more managing the overload of toxins in your system. So that's a toxic crisis. And then there's a treatment crisis when you, let's say, would come along to see me, and rather than me giving you loads of information and driving you towards better health, I just get stuck straight into your body. Or you go along and you have a really good, really nice, long but 2-hour massage. Or you go and have a good counseling session. Or you go to someone who does a lot of acupuncture. Anything from the outside that physiologically changes your body, but effectively by reducing the tone, by manual treatment, by these different modalities, we forcibly almost release toxins in your body that you weren't choosing to release. You just went along on a Tuesday morning to this great therapist who gave you an amazing treatment. But then sometimes maybe the following day you're feeling really rough and you've got a bit of a fever and you're dealing with that release of toxins from the subcutaneous tissues. And so that's what I call a treatment crisis. That's ones where I'm teaching osteopath students, chiropractors, other manual therapists about the physiological ability, the ability to physiologically change your patient with palpation, with treatment, with movement, but also by helping them, you might be pushing them into a crisis. And then the skill comes with knowing how long to treat someone for, how much to do, how much you can encourage without being a sort of threat or a force to the body. And the last crisis is one which we would call a healing crisis. This is one where you take these physiological requirements of life and you start to change your lifestyle in order to promote health and well-being. Drinking more water, having more sunlight on your skin, having more rest and a better quality of sleep, breathing unpolluted air,
yoga mat, right?
all of these things. And then we start maybe going for counseling, we go to AA, we start doing some yoga, we join a yoga class, we join a meditation class. All of these things that start to reduce our stress, start to help to reduce the toxic overload from our environment, and start to improve the way our body works on a physiological level. And then what happens is these people are then improving in their health until they reach a point where their body decides, okay, I've done all the spring cleaning in my house, I've tidied all the floors, I've got right the way back to the bare bones, and now I can really deal with that sort of cupboard that has been stuck there for the last 10 years filled with junk that I really have never got to. And then the person goes into a healing crisis. It might be a random night where they just feel not very well, they crawl into bed, but they've been undergoing maybe days, weeks, months, years worth of improving areas of their lifestyle. And then suddenly they have a bit of a fever, they get a bit of a cough, they don't feel very well, they lose their appetite, their mouth feels weird, their sacrum starts to burn, and they want to crawl into bed. And that is a true healing crisis. It's where the body has decided on its own, I'm going to deal with this cupboard at the back of the house. I've done all of the irrigation, I've cleared all the cobwebs and cleared all the floor in front of me so that I can open this so that all the gunge can fall out on the floor and I'm ready to clear it up. And that's a really important aspect, because what we can do is we can then start giving healthful advice to everybody, whether they're, you know, newborn or they're on their last breath as a 90-year-old. We can give them advice which changes their environment and improves their ability to express themselves vitally, and we start to see their body as a working mechanism, as a machine, and we understand the consciousness, and we see maybe how vitally energetic that person is and how much they're trying to express. But it's through all these ways that we start to really just gain total control on our health. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely does. And you speak with so much clarity and as I said, passion. And yeah, I'm sure, you know, when you're talking about the healing process there, that certainly for me, and I know for many of our listeners and yogis, you know, that was definitely my experience, was like in regards to finding the yoga mat, getting my yoga mat on the floor and starting to breathe and move and unravel the stuff that really wasn't working. And it definitely takes time, and it's an ongoing process. But it's definitely there's a big alignment here in what you're talking about in regards to us as yogis. It's so powerful, Alex. I really appreciate what you're sharing.
Yeah, it's also one of those ones where, you know, I grew up watching physical amazing athletes as dancers. I saw their ability to do, you know, things that were just people still do find incredible, really working the body to its extreme. They're sort of super athletes. However, seeing the later stage, I see the destruction of that sort of style of living. And so within it, you do get a lot of casualties afterwards, and that's sometimes casualties from not just having good movement, but over moving and overtraining and undersleeping and under resting and eating the wrong ways, so that when we take away that adrenal outpouring that can come from strong physical training and the release of endorphins that in itself becomes addictive.
Yeah,
training
it's a dilemma, I guess.
to many athletes, and you'll know this the same as the person who says, I have to train every day,
Yeah.
but I'm also riddled with tendinitises and inflammations, and I'm taking all these painkillers, I'm in a lot of pain, but I have to train. And we say, well, how about we drop back the training? And then sometimes they'll say, well, yeah, but that's when my mind starts doing really bad things, and I find that I start slipping into some really bad practices, and actually trying to slow down that or trying to change that, whether you're a yogi or a dancer or an athlete or a super athlete. It's really good when we're feeling powerful, and no one's not going to admit that being able to run and feeling top of the world and light is great. But there's a lot of time where I think we're very good at pushing our bodies through and creating endorphins and creating adrenaline through the pressure of going forward and feeling like that we can't stop because that's a failure.
Right. Wow.
And how many times do we find that these athletes, whether they're, you know, people that you might watch from on the TV of any different sport, when they're at the top of their profession, when they stop and they reduce that adrenal tone, what happens? And I also think from the yogic perspective that that it's also quite important to think, well, it's, you know, what kind of class, how would your class differ if we took an arbitrary class of 10 people that might be 8 females in their 20s or 30s who are, you know, very flexible, for example, making a lot of lifestyle changes. But what if we had 10 80 or 90-year-olds in the room? How would one change the flow or yoga practice or exercise or lifestyle advice to suit them?
Adaptability, of course.
And I think, yeah, that adaptability, and that's where we would say, you know, yoga has enormous background with a huge philosophy. That doesn't mean that it hasn't, in certain respects, been turned into a kind of exercise program for some people.
Yeah, Absolutely, for sure.
And so sometimes that breath work, or as I used to say with dancers, is that you could spot a ballet dancer walking along the road because of the way they hold themselves, their externally rotated hips, their sort of held in tummy, their upper breathing pattern, looking very adrenal. And that's actually because the training is very adrenal. And for performing, you can't breathe right with your diaphragm because you can't let your tummy go in and out, and you can't let those adrenal glands drop. And sometimes when you're doing shows every night till 11 o'clock at night and eating dinner at 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night and then waking up very early to start class, it's not necessarily what we would consider a natural environment. And so it's trying to find, at least for myself, when I look at patients, it's like seeing a web, seeing their life as a web. And the more experience I have, I kind of can't believe, treating people for sort of 20 plus years now, you really start to just see these areas of their life where they're really maybe lacking, or those are the big things, and those are the times that's the way to jump through. That's the experience part. But very often it's doing less, not more.
Wow, if there was one thing to get out from this discussion, for sure, for me it would be that, right? Doing less is more. And that really aligns to working with many sort of highly ambitious people that have this sort of tendency to have this perfectionism, or they just, as you spoke about it earlier, they just want to keep going, keep doing. But actually, in reality, getting better at life is sometimes going to be doing less.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we, again, it's very sticking people into a box. But if we take, the media world, the big business world, then sometimes whenever you got the hierarchy in businesses, you tend to find that the person, as you go higher and higher up, the next person, sleeps more and drinks drinks more than the person below, and doesn't have to sleep as nearly so much. And rather than doing a marathon, they're doing Ironman, and rather than Ironman, they're doing ultras, and going up and up and up, and they're hardly sleeping. And it's just seen as a power, that it's more powerful to be doing more. But very often with those people, when they either retire, there's a physical, mental, emotional breakdown that sometimes occurs. Or we look at people and we always aspire to feel good and do more. That's completely natural. But learning not our limits, but learning what our body's trying to tell us is the success, is the way for longevity.
That's it, right?
And it's simply, once we start to listen to our body about how much we need to move and sleep and breathe and be and live, we start picking up more and more as to when we're burning the candle at the wrong ends, or we make the wrong decisions, but then we know what to do in order to get out of it.
So would you say bringing more, like, we talk about doing and being, and actually, is there a way that, I believe so, that we can bring more of the being? So if we allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to experience more being in life,
Yeah.
slowing down, actually we can then start to transition that being into the doing. So when we're actually doing and in that busyness, which, look, there's so many high demands coming at us, if we could bring more of the being into the doing, perhaps we actually maybe even enjoy what we're doing even more. But actually, like you say, the longevity, we have that sort of lasting energy or vibrancy, and perhaps fulfillment as well, Alex.
Yeah, definitely. And also, one of the good old terminologies, and nature cure is for you and you alone. So it's quite important to start the process for your own body before we encourage other people. It's amazing how many patients I still have who want their husband or their wife or their child or their mother to do the thing that they're not doing, but they really want the other person to start doing it or start coming for treatment. And I'm always trying to remind them that if we just start with ourselves and you focus on the things that you're doing, then other people will follow. We don't like being questioned. We don't like being told what to do. We like to make that choices for ourselves. So if we start the process for ourselves, then the other people will tend to follow. That's the first thing. And the second one is, I was always taught by one of my old teachers to seek out health professionals, health practitioners who are attaining a level of vitality or health that you require, you want for yourself. We try and at least walk the walk ourselves, with our family, ourselves, our kids, in order to sort of show, well, this is what it's able to do. This is not a sort of a very hippie thing of walking away from the medical profession. Don't get me wrong, if you've been in a car accident, if you've had an acute external injury through an accident, then of course accident and emergency and the ability that comes with modern medical abilities to save your life are beyond anything that we could possibly imagined in the past. So acute accident and emergency, of course, you go in, you take all the treatment, and then you put yourself back together healthfully as much as you can afterwards. But as far as the management of acute illnesses, which is pretty much everything in your body, any organ, any tissue, with the postfix itis, just means inflammation of that tissue. You know, whether it's tendonitis or bronchitis or itis, it's inflammation of the area. So we've got to understand why it's being inflamed, why it's going through a period of healing, and what ways to support it. And so this is all focusing on our own abilities to get to a point where a lot of these chronic diseases drop away. And once we see the body not having to deal with this toxic overload, we're much more in a wild state of being, in which, in the same way within wild animals, you don't tend to see them suffering from overindulgence until those animals are living in proximity to human beings. So a lot of wild animals will really only die when they've had a bad accident, or they've been eaten themselves by somewhere else. They don't tend to die from chronic diseases from over or underindulgence of their physiological needs.
Wow, it's so insightful, Alex. It's great, and I've loved this conversation, and I know that our listeners will as well. How do they how can they explore where you are, what you're up to? Look, Alex, as I said earlier on, Alex he's been treating me over the last 3 or 4 years. There's been a pause during the pandemic, but he, as I said, he's got magical hands. He knows what he's doing, and he's such a great person. So how do they find you?
How they find me? So so I live in Stroud, and I have a practice here in the garden in my home in a nice shepherd's hut.
Around the village with no shoes on, for sure.
I do. I live outside, and people walk along the Cotswold Way looking in and think, "What is going on in that garden over there?" All those people. I run so I treat from Stroud in a lovely shepherd's hut, and I also still run a practice in West London in Chiswick every 2 weeks, every fortnight, because I've had the practice there for over 20 years. So that's where I do the sort of lovely hands-on holding space and mechanically improving your body really, really quickly. I also do nature cure and naturopathic consultations, again in person at those 2 places, which is again giving all of that lifestyle advice and how to really step away from the medical profession and to do the lifestyle changes that you need. So that sometimes I have patients who come for osteopathic and for nature cure consults, depending on where they're at. So that's it in person, Stroud or in West London. Of course, a lot of this lifestyle stuff can be done over the phone. So you just get in contact with me either through our website, which is myhealthandhappiness.co.uk, and that will have all my details as far as my mobile and phone and where we are here. You can get hold of us. As far as like inspiration or just following us is concerned, I'm on Instagram at Nature Cure Family, or Facebook at Nature Cure Life. Those ones are just trying to put out fun little tips and hints as to how to stack your life when you've got 2 kids and you want to try and fit multi-directional positive lifestyle changes into your life, and how do you fit that in with work and kids and everything that goes about it. So that's why I'm normally doing all of these silly videos that are multi-directional, multidisciplinary, repetitive movements, come it breakdancing, wobble boarding, climbing trees, gardening, stuff that I just feel that for myself, I don't do a specific yoga practice myself, but I do a lot of different movement practices that kind of cover those same bases. But so sometimes that's a fun way of just getting a little bit of inspiration as to how to follow up. So,
well, we could argue that it's all yoga, right? Anyway, so
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's all movement, isn't it?
Real pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much for your time and
My pleasure, Jace.
So many golden nuggets there. It's been brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I look forward to seeing you soon, Alex.
Yeah, no worries, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
So welcome. So my friends, if you've enjoyed today's discussion, please hit the button to subscribe to this channel and also the like button. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. You will find us at @thehouseofyoga_. Thanks so much for listening and have a wonderful day.